All right, episode 69. We are officially in back to school season, and now I'm getting old enough to where people my age are posting pictures on social media about how they're sending their kids off to school, which is definitely a little scary. But back to school anxiety was something I'll never forget. You had to confront just the harsh reality that summer was coming to an end, and you had to get back into a schedule where everything was new. You had new classes, new teachers, new experiences, new friends, new shitbag kids that you'd have to deal with every day, just knew everything. But then you also felt like the added pressure of needing to reinvent yourself. Like how many times did you look in the mirror and say, this is going to be my year, the year everything changes for me? Frankly, it never turned out that way, but boy, was it an exciting thought. Now it's funny to look back at those first day of school experiences and realize how none of those little stresses or anxiety-filled moments, none of it really mattered. Like the amount of stress the average kid just plays up in their heads is insane. But maybe it was just me, how I just overanalyzed everything. And obviously hindsight is 2020. As you grow up, you realize just how stupid it was to stress out about some of the shit that you were, and realize one, how little control you have over certain situations, and then two, I guess what is actually worth stressing out about. But today I thought it'd be fun to relive the first day of school stresses. Before we get into the actual school, let's start with something like back to school shopping. Where can you convince your parents to take you for some clothes? I think the majority of my school years, my mom took my sister and I to Kohl's because she could just get us both done at the same time. Plus, Kohl's Cash was like crack to an early 2000s mom. I don't know the ins and outs of Kohl's Cash, but she was wheeling and dealing it, man. They always showed those crazy marked down prices too, and when you check out, they'd be like, "You saved $500." And you're like, "No fucking way! It's not even possible." But I feel like Tilly's and PacSun were also two staples back then for any teen. It's crazy to think how malls were such a big thing back then. In Vegas, you had the Meadows Mall, which was nicknamed the Ghettos Mall because of the certain interesting crowds that you'd run into there. I just watched Fast Times at Ridgemont High for the first time this past week, and it was crazy to see how big mall culture used to be. Everyone worked at the mall, and the entire just social atmosphere kind of revolved around this one physical location. I don't really think that exists anymore, though, with social media and gaming and instant messaging. You can just connect with friends anywhere. But yeah, it was crazy to kind of see that. Anyways, yeah, in terms of today, I have no idea where kids shop. We went to a pizza place yesterday, and it was right on next to a college campus. My wife and I were like, what the fuck are these little sluts wearing, And we just had such an old person mentality looking at all of these little college kids. But when you're young, your image is everything, and you had to make sure you had your shit just dialed in. Usually you were given a strict budget, stay below this amount and you can get what you want. So it really depended on, for me at least, where I shopped. I knew if I was looking at something like Urban Outfitters, that would drastically cut down the number of pieces I could get for the year because their clothing was a little more expensive. The worst part was going school shopping too early before school started, though, because the one rule was that you couldn't wear your new clothes until school started, which fucking drove me insane. Show me the logic behind this reasoning. And then it just ramped up the first day of school pressure because I'm internally trying to theoretically think about the best outfit combinations and all of that. And it was just, yeah, it was what's going to set the tone for the year, what's going to turn heads, which outfit combo from the Kohl's boys department is going to get the job done. Another high anxiety first day of school moment was figuring out the locker situation. I didn't use my locker too much in high school, but in middle school, it was multiple trips a day. I was switching out and locking up accordion folders and binders it was just top secret information. But on the first day, you not only had to find your locker, but you had to remember how to use a lock on the locker. First, you had to reset it by spinning the dial a shit ton of times to the right. And then when you were ready, you had to stop at your first number. Then you had to switch to the left, pass 0, and then stop at your second number, and then go back to the right and stop at your third number. And you had to do this exactly on that exact little line. And if this wasn't already enough pressure, you had the added pressure of finding out where your next class was going to be and getting there before the final bell. Because if you didn't make it, all eyes would be on you just immediately if you showed up late. And I was like not trying to have that all eyes on me moment. And it was like, I was like fucking Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Like my life depended on figuring out this code and getting it right so that I could book it to class. Remember those kids who would dead sprint to class every day? Like compared to them, I must have looked like I had all my shit figured out, which is good. But I wonder whatever happened to those kids. Like what inspired them to haul that much ass in between classes? Was it like fear-based? Was it an internal like game? Like how much time can I shave off my 17-second time last week? I don't know. Like I don't know what it was, but for me, it was never worth running to a class. Ever sit in the wrong class on the first day of school? Oh boy, like how long did it take for you to realize? The minute you do, you've got a decision to make. Do you get up and make a complete ass of yourself, or do you just stay quiet and call it a loss? Usually the teachers would call roll and there would be like one or two kids who weren't on the list, right? And they'd be like, let me see your schedule. And then they'd proceed to announce to the entire class that you're in the wrong room and you're a fucking idiot. Thankfully, that never happened to me. I always respected the kids, though, who once they realized, they just fucking stood right up and walked out. Didn't say a word to anyone, not even the teacher. They just accepted defeat, and they were like, shit happens. But those kids never really had anxiety, I don't think, ever in their life, which I'm very jealous of. On the first day of school, though, you usually had something known as homeroom, where you got your class schedule for the year. This is where the real stress happened, because you'd be talking to your friends or people next to you or texting to find out if they got the same classes as you did. And usually there were two lunch breaks, lunch break A and lunch break B. And if you didn't have the same lunch as your friends, this is where panic would just set in. Like, what the fuck am I going to do? If this ever happened to me, I could always rely on making plans with the kids around me in my homeroom. So typically your homeroom was based on alphabetical order, right? And not only like this class, but most classes were in alphabetical order your first at least week of school too. But wow, is it a crazy thought to think about when you realize how your life could be affected by something so small like the first letter of your last name? Some of my good friends throughout grade school just were my friends because their last name also was close to mine. But it's a complete gamble. The girls I always thought were cute never had a last name near mine. My last name starts with an L, so typically I was in the middle of the class. But the girls I always had a crush on always seemed to be like on the opposite spectrum of the alphabet. If I had the same last name as them, who knows where I'd be today? No, I'm just kidding. I had zero confidence, and I probably wouldn't have said shit regardless. How about the icebreakers you'd have to do the first day of school? Teachers would say, all right, tell the class one thing you did this summer. And then I would just completely blank. I'd be like, what the fuck did I just do the last 3 months? It's all a blur. And you wanted to sound cool and exciting, right? Like this was your first chance at reinventing this image that I was talking about. The cool kids always did something like zip lining, or they rode ATVs in Hawaii, or something cool like that. But another part of this was that you don't want to repeat someone's answer from earlier, because then you just sound unoriginal. And by the time they got to me, half the class had already went. So I had no other option. I was like, I went to the beach. And then I'd regret my answer the entire rest of the period until I had to do it all over again the next class. By the time I actually had like a good response after hearing so many other kids talk, it'd be like fifth or sixth period. And the teachers like wouldn't even ask by then, because they were just so done with hearing these kids say some dumbass answers. Speaking of teachers, though, they'd always have a pretty profound impact on how like your first day of school would really go, because it was syllabus week. And every teacher had a unique approach to this. They'd either be really chill and just outline the basic structure of the class and the grading system and call it, or they'd just fucking deep dive into this 6-7 page document and just dump their entire school year on your plate like it was the only class you had for the whole year. I remember one time I got put into a pre-AP course, and after one class of hearing this teacher fucking deep dive into this syllabus, I had a complete mental breakdown. I got switched out of that shit the very next day. I was just like, fuck this. And my sister was valedictorian of the high school, so some of these teachers recognized my last name, and they would call it out expecting me to be just like equally smart as her. But no way in hell, man. I don't know how we were wired so differently when it came to school, but we just took two completely opposite paths. Remember the teachers that used to give you quizzes on reading the syllabus? Like, fuck off. I couldn't fucking stand teachers like that. There were a handful of teachers throughout grade school that just made life hell for no reason at all. I think my worst teacher was my chemistry high school teacher. She was just this mean old bitch and like found zero pleasure in her job. She was the only C that I got in high school too, and it caused me an immense amount of stress. I had a 79 and I begged this woman for any shot at bumping me up to a B, and she wouldn't. There was always a point in syllabus week though where the teacher discusses extra credit and their approach on like the rounding system of grades. Some teachers early in the year would offer extra credit for bringing in school supplies. So you're sitting on the bus on like day 3 with just grocery bags of paper towels and tissue boxes. It was a rough sight. It sets you up for success in the classroom, but a failure when it comes to the social aspect of school. Thankfully, I learned this very quickly. There's enough extra credit usually that's offered toward the end of the year so that you don't have to do this. But I swear to God, like, where did all of these tissues go? Like, did the teachers just pocket them? Because all I ever saw left out were these rough-ass brown paper towels that felt like construction paper. I never personally got up to like use a tissue like to blow my nose in class though. The kids who did that had confidence. I never even like coughed in class. You know those times when you have like those lingering mucusy coughs from like a cold or a flu? I held those bad boys in until I was just like red in the face. I was just watching that clock because I was not about to bring attention to myself fucking coughing and grossing out the entire class. Anyways, if you're starting school this week, try not to stress. I'll give you a little stat that I saw this week. There was a recent study at Cornell University where they followed subjects over an extended period and asked them about things they feared and then observed which of these anxieties actually came to pass. And they found that 85% of things that people worry about never actually happen. And of the 15% that do, 79% of individuals found the challenges to be easier to handle than expected, or they gained valuable lessons from them, which means that 97% of the things that we worry about really aren't even worth worrying about at all. So relax. You've got this. Don't overcomplicate things for yourself, all right? And yeah, with that, I'll talk to you next week. Good luck.